All right, so there's the physical conditioning thing. The next section is called Chapter 12, The Creating of Superior Units. 4 basic principles. I have found that there are 4 basic principles which apply to the problem of creating Army units which are considered superior. First, the superior unit must be created from the ordinary run of personnel. How awesome is that? You're going to make a superior unit, but anybody that's ever served in the military knows that you're going to get what you get. And yet, we all know that there's units that are freaking awesome and there's units that are horrible. And both the awesome units and the horrible units have run-of-the-mill people in them.
They come from the same pool of soldiers in this case. It's all the same people. You don't get to pick your little team of your superstar athletes in this case.
And it's the same thing in business, right? It's the same thing in business. You get businesses that are in the same market and one of them is crushing and the other one's not. Well, why is that? Why is that? You're both getting to hire from the same group of human beings in the country, whatever country you're in. So the superior unit must be created from the ordinary run of personnel. Second, classified according to ability, the men in a unit fall naturally into 3 groupings: upper, middle, and lower. The excellence of a unit depends upon the ability of the commander to bring the men of the lower group to a degree of proficiency which makes them an asset to his unit team. So we're going to get into some stuff where I'm not sure about. And this is one of them. And he talks about it a little bit more. I mean, he talks about your focus being making the people that are, he's basically saying you got really good people, middle people, and bad people. He's saying the focus is like make the bad people better. Make the bad people a plus for the unit. I don't necessarily agree with that. I agree with that should be a focus, a singular focus. I don't think it should be the full. I would rather take my people that are up the top and make them totally awesome and make my people that are in the middle like really, really good. I'm not going to focus my efforts on the turds.
Yeah. The reason I didn't say anything when you read that, because I had that little is I'm going to listen to what General Clark has to say before I get to it. But on its face, though, when you said that, my first instinct was okay, I don't think that's right. But obviously he's going to say something about it. But we get this question in business all the time. Is leaders will devote all their attention to their bottom performers, like almost all of their attention. It's like, why would you invest all of your time in your least productive people? Why wouldn't you invest most of your time in your most productive people? Yeah. Again, you don't ignore those people. But if you're devoting, and again, he's going to say something, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But when you said that, I had that reaction of, huh.
Well, it's like if you, let's say, on a level of 1 to 5, you're a 5, and Echo's a 1. 1 being the worst, 5 being the best.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
So if I take my efforts and I'm able to double your power, I can turn you into a 10. I can only turn Echo into a 2. Exponentially positive returns on Dave Berke.
Yeah.
Kind of not on Echo Charles.
We'll just say less.
All right, next. Third, all men this is such an interesting one. Third, all men desire to do what is wanted of them. All men desire to do what is wanted of them. Okay? So that's the first part. So let's absorb that. And then he goes on to just take some ownership here. When they do not, it is because they have not been adequately motivated and instructed. So, have you ever had anybody in your squadron that straight up just didn't want to do what was wanted of them?
You know, I would say yes, in the sense that, yeah, there are people that I've had in my units that fit that bill, and we did something about that. His point, I understand his point, though, and the idea that I'm going to write that person off as unwilling to do it. To me, it was more of like how much of my time, how much energy am I going to devote to try to find the way that gets you to where you need to be? So while I don't disagree with that comment, Yeah, I've had people in my sphere multiple times throughout my career that simply didn't get where they needed to be. And could you say, hey, that's the fault of the leader? Yes, 100%. But the leader also still has to make a little measurement of, am I going to devote 100% of my time to getting that guy from a 1 to a 2? Or am I going to go, hey, man, this investment in you right now is going to take away from all this other stuff, and I'm going to cut you loose.
Yeah, and by the way, what's 10 times 0?
Yeah.
If the person's a 0, well, now so listen. I think all men is an overstatement. I think you could throw a percentage on there that's upwards of 97%.
Yeah.
97% that want to do a good job.
Yeah.
They want to do a good job.
And to his point, as a leader, your default should be is they're not the problem. Your default to be is the percentage is so high that you might as well just go in the assumption that the problem isn't with them. So that 97% is I think actually correct, not all. But I think his point too is like, hey, if you're in charge of people and they're not up to standards, you need to spend most of your time figuring out what you're doing wrong.
Yeah. Most people don't need to be fired. They need to be led. I think we wrote that in Extreme Ownership or in Dichotomy of Leadership. I think it's in Dichotomy of Leadership. Most people don't need to be fired. They need to be led. Most people.
Yeah.
All people? No. You're going to get, and you know what? When you see this, and you didn't get to see this because you were an officer and you went through OCS. When you go through like Navy boot camp, you see some people that don't want to be there. Like they do not want to be there. They're there for 15 minutes. They're like, this ain't for me. And they're going to do whatever they got to do to get, they don't want to do what is wanted of them. Right. They don't.
Yeah.
They want out. Fourth, the best unit in an organization is always the one which is excellent or better in all things. If you agree with these precepts, let us analyze and apply them to the basic problem of the commander who is striving for a superior unit. Applications of the principles to the unit. The problems of polishing ordinary units until they emerge as superior are primarily the problems of raising individual performance and capabilities to a superior level. The many truly outstanding units which have been produced in our Army give ample evidence that these problems can be solved. Based on the fact that their percentile scores on the AFQT, which is like the ASVAB, which is it's the basic intelligence test that you take when you're coming in the military as an enlisted guy. Do you take it to become an officer? The ASVAB?
Yeah. No, I took took the ASVAB. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So you take like a basic test. It's sort of an SAT, an ACT type test.
Totally.
How smart are you is basically what it is. And then he ranks it out into 3 groups. And it's the upper third, the middle third, the lower third. But he's got this little thing in here, and he's got the scores listed, and I'm not going to go into those. But the upper third is 11% and 34%. So the top 2 groups combined make up 45%. So 45% of people are in the 65 percentile and higher of that testing. 43% are in the middle. So you're almost done. And then the last 12% is people that are in not the lowest group, but the second to the lowest group. So if you get between 0 and 9 on the ASVAB, and this is actually the AFQT, which is the old ASVAB. So the scores won't correlate to what we know about since we didn't take the ASVAB we didn't take the AFQT in 1958. So what he's saying is you're going to get mostly people that are either in the middle group or in the higher group, which is great. Now, I'm sure that there's some people that are thinking, well, that's the difference, I'm in the civilian world and we get these people. They're not. No. When you start talking about people that are in the lowest scoring brackets of the ASVAB, like they can't get in the military, but they're also not going to be applying for a job that's going to take some high level cognitive abilities. They're just not going to be there. So I've got a very interesting book that I'm going to cover on the podcast, and I've been reading it for a while. I've actually showed it to you several months ago because I've been stewing on it. But it's during the Vietnam War, they needed people.
Yeah.
They needed people to be in the military. They needed people to be in the military to go to Vietnam, and so they started to lower the standards, and the main standard that they lowered was the IQ level. or I don't know if you want to call it the IQ level, but that's basically what's the intellectual level, the intelligence level. And they started getting these people in the military that were they just didn't have the mental capacity to do really any job. You think about in the military, there's some jobs that don't take a lot of intellectual horsepower, right? I mean, you need people that are going to clean the toilets. You got people that are gonna. And look, this is what I did when I got in the military, right? When I got the SEAL teams, I was cleaning toilets. But then you're going to move up and you're going to move on. But at some place, you need some people that are going to have some pretty fundamentally non-high cognitive skill requirement jobs. Well, they started letting people in that just didn't have the capability. It's a really sad. And a lot of these guys went to Vietnam. They had a higher casualty rate. They had more of them got killed. Because they just didn't understand things. And the guy that wrote this book that I'm reading, he's talking about going through boot camp, and he basically gets paired up with one of these guys, and all the drill instructors knew it. They called them like McNamara's morons. That's what they'd call these guys when they'd come in. And he got assigned one of these guys basically to help get him through boot camp. And one of the opening scenes is they're telling him, hey, write your address on this postcard and write a message to your family. And not only did he not know how to write, but he didn't even know what his address was. He didn't even know what street he lived on. He didn't know. They had to teach him how to tie his shoes. And they had to teach him how to tie his shoes, not just, hey, this is how you do it. No, they had to teach him for extended periods of time how to tie his shoes. So these are people that are really in a low intellectual level, and we brought, I think it was about 100,000 of them into the military, which is just horrible, just horrible. So my point in saying all that is, we're talking about, in the civilian sector, you're not getting that person either to apply for your job in accounting, right? So don't think to yourself, well, my accounting department, my people they're not smart either. No, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about that. So he goes on to say that those in the upper groupings are the best educated and quickest to learn, can be well motivated, but need to be challenged to develop their full potential. The middle groupings are average run of American youth. They are easily controlled, take well to discipline, learn easily, respond to good leadership, but are usually capable of more, and they must be pushed. The lower groupings are the ones that need special attention. And again, this is where you and I are kind of like, the lower groupings are the ones who need special attention. The disciplinary problem in this group is higher than average. I agree with that. The individuals require special motivation and instruction. Agree with that. Their attitude constitutes a special barometer of the esprit de corps of the unit. This group contains also many of the misfits who, if they cannot be assimilated, must be eliminated. So it's interesting that he's calling for special attention on this lower group. And then he says, in a single squad crew, go.
Well, I'm thinking in my mind as I'm hearing you talk about this, just things that I've heard you say on this podcast, things we've talked about on your podcast. And I'm trying to kind of consider what's in General Clark's head as I'm hearing this. Obviously, I'm trying to put myself in his position. Mm-hmm. We've talked about this before, and I think the way you said it was, anybody on your team has the potential to undo your entire plan. And so I'm trying to make this connection in my head of the things he's talking about, why you would devote so much effort to these people. And I'm just trying to place in my head why he's saying it the way he's saying it, which there is, if they're on your team and you keep them on your team, these aren't people you get rid of, but they're on your team and they are underperformers or low performers, they still have the potential of undoing your plan. And so I'm trying to piece the things that he's thinking almost I don't know what he's going to say, but I do understand that. The flip side of that, the other thing I've been thinking about, we work with companies that, some of the companies we work with have this philosophy is, hey, we're going to pay more and we're going to attract a higher bar, a higher average level, because we are a higher paying organization. So we're going to, and there's a bunch of economic theory behind that. And their belief is that they're going to attract better talent. And you know what they end up with? The exact same problems as all other organizations. They still have a bell curve. They still have underperformers. And this is something you said too, is even in the SEAL teams, and people create this image on their mind of what a SEAL is, and they're superhuman. And how many times have you said, no, they're people? The exact same thing at Top Gun, where people place these guys on a pedestal as if they're somehow all of them uniquely capable. And we had a bottom 12% at Top Gun too. We had underperformers at Top Gun, just like everywhere else. So for me to think about it, if you're in a leadership role, the takeaway from this is that what is required for all this is your leadership more than anything. Now, I do want to hear his thoughts on that, but your underperformers can still undo your plan. And there's no free pass of, hey, we just have a better screening process, so we weed out those people. Well, we know that that's not true. Those problems exist in the same bell curve in every organization.
Yeah, and the other thing that affects the bell curve is the bar that everyone has to be staying above. So the bottom 12% at Top Gun, they're the bottom 12% at Top Gun. They may be the top tier of some other organization somewhere, but at Top Gun, they're the bottom 12%, and they're making the same kind of mistakes relative to their job. It's the same thing in the SEAL teams. Like, oh yeah, the SEAL teams, we have a bottom part of the bell curve. Now those people might be really good if they had some other job somewhere. In Task Unit Bruiser, we had to get rid of one guy. It was a great guy. He was a hard worker. He just didn't quite have the capacity to get the job done. I guarantee he went to his next unit in the Navy and was the best sailor they had. I can guarantee that, because he was a hard worker. He wanted to do a good job. He just didn't quite have that decision-making process. And maybe I shouldn't have said the best sailor, but he's going to be a really good guy. And so, but the bar is higher for what you're being required to do, right? This is what you're, like at Top Gun, you're being required to fly this jet at these G's and make these decisions and maneuver and remember what's happening and debrief and communicate and pay attention to 9 different things at the same time. You're required to do all that stuff. And the people that are barely able to do it, they're the bottom of the bell curve. You put them, driving an Uber, and they're going to be the best freaking Uber driver, in at least in the top, let's say the top 5% of Uber driver, because I've had some damn good Uber drivers before. So yes, that bell curve exists everywhere. You're not going to get away from it, and you do have to lead. And I agree with your point. Why General Clark might be saying, hey, you got to pay attention to that bottom 12%, because no one in the top 88% is going to, there's much less chance of them torpedoing your whole mission.
Right.
Those knuckleheads, they're holding the freaking trigger to the torpedo, and they could fire that thing off at any moment. So you got to pay attention to them. That might be the genesis of his focus on these individuals.
Is that probably where what's the saying? You're only as strong as your weakest link kind of a philosophy, right?
Yep.
Yeah, maybe that's where it came from.
It's from that, definitely from that concept, that broad concept.
Yeah.